Kenichi was a single 40-year-old office worker who spent most of his time at his job, but no one really appreciated his hard work. Until one day when he suddenly finds himself in the middle of a dangerous forest in a whole new world. At first he is confused, but soon his SS rank abilities awaken, and with the power of online shopping he becomes a successful merchant and bags a harem of baddies. At first he refused to believe that he got ice guide to another world since he never saw Truck-kun, and thinks he is dreaming. But surprisingly enough, a status window pops up in front of him, showing him a bunch of different options. He immediately gets excited thinking that he probably is the chosen hero, but soon realizes that the options are simply an item box, the trash can, and an online shopping site. He is surprised to find that he can access the site using his system window, and then checks out the item box by placing a plant inside it. Suddenly, he starts feeling hungry and decides to try the shopping app. But unfortunately, he has no money to buy anything. He wonders if he can sell something and tries with the plant in his item box. The item box tells him that it is weed, but not the kind that fetches you money. Kenichi thinks there is no hope when his eyes fall on the sword of a dead knight lying nearby. He sells the sword for 98,000 yen, and that is more than enough to feed him for a few days. He also buys a shovel to make a grave for the dead warrior, then buys a bicycle to move quickly through the forest and a monocular to see his surroundings. He begins to look for a settlement and comes up with a business plan to sell things from the modern world to the ignorant peasants here. One evening, as he is having a comfortable dinner, he sees a bunch of dog-like monsters approaching him. He freaks out and begins looking for weapons online, but obviously the app was not based in America, so he doesn't get anything useful. He first throws some fireworks at the monsters, but that doesn't scare them much. Luckily, he finds a slingshot, a weapon that he knows how to use, even though his aim is worse than a stormtrooper's. He manages to hit a couple of monsters after wasting a few bullets, and they decide to retreat quickly. Kenichi uses this chance and cycles away from them as fast as he can, not stopping till it is morning. He is at the edge of the forest now, and finds that there is a city nearby. He thinks this is the start of his business empire, and he purchases a leather bag and some black pepper with the last of his funds. He begins heading towards the road, crossing the tall grass, and almost gets run over by a merchant carriage. The merchant Fayu learns that Kenichi is heading towards the city as well, so he gives him a ride alongside the traveling bard. Once they reach the city, Kenichi helps Fayu unload some stuff. Fayu thanks him, but Kenichi says he should be the one thanking him for telling him a lot about the city and business on the way. To thank Fayu, Kenichi gives him the bag of black pepper, and this makes the blonde merchant nervous. He whispers in Kenichi's ear to stop thinking about selling spices, because a scary merchant group named Bacopa has the monopoly on it. Fayu says that one should never sell spices openly, but if it is a private deal, it is fine. He begins looking for his purse, but Kenichi says that he doesn't need money. Fayu replies that as a merchant, he loves getting things for cheap but never for free. He gives Kenichi some copper and silver coins, whose value is 50,000 yen, and Kenichi is shocked because he got the black pepper for just 950 yen. After that, he walks around the city for a bit before finding an inn. A cheerful girl named Azalea greets him at the inn and starts making small talk while registering him. She finds that Kenichi wants to be a merchant, but he can't read or write the language of this country. She tells him that if he can't read and write and do basic math, the merchant guild won't accept him. Kenichi asks her to teach him how to read and write because he is already good at math, and in exchange, he will give her candies from another country. His honey trap works on Azalea, who learns the true meaning of happiness on eating candies that would usually be far beyond her reach. She begins to teach Kenichi how to read and write their language, and he picks it up quickly because it is not much different from Japanese. While he practices, Azalea makes herself comfortable in his room, and she starts seducing Kenichi because she is sure that he will become a successful businessman soon. Kenichi tells her not to bother with him because he is old enough to be her father, but Azalea is ready to call him daddy. Kenichi then gives her a Titanic-style sketch of her, and Azalea is so intensely rizzed by that, she immediately jumps on him and lets him clap those cheeks. The next day, Kenichi goes to the merchant guild and gets his ID, which is like a small wand. After that, he takes a stroll around the market, learning the value of various items. A fruit vendor grabs his attention with her melons and asks him to buy something from her. Kenichi doesn't even know about the fruits of this world, but he buys them and then asks Azalea about them later. She tells him about the fruits and then asks if he managed to get his merchant license. Kenichi shows her the wand, and she starts prancing with joy because now her sugar daddy can start earning. The next day, Kenichi does some carpentry to create a stall for himself while Azalea is watching over him. She notices the wooden cloth clips and tells him that he can sell them because they don't have good cloth clips here. After that, Kenichi goes to the market and takes the spot next to an old lady. As he pulls out his stall from the item box, the woman gets surprised and comes to check up on his wares. She finds that he is selling high-quality items, but what catches her attention the most are the wooden clips. She buys some from Kenichi and then introduces herself as Anama, a veteran merchant. Soon, the customers start coming to their shops, and most of them buy Kenichi's wooden clips. Thanks to that, Anama also gets more business than usual. Soon, a young blonde man comes to his shop, and seeing his clothes and his sword, Kenichi realizes that he must be fairly rich. The man is interested in knives, and he asks Kenichi if he has anything bigger than the things on display. Kenichi begins looking through the shopping app to find a bigger knife, and he soon finds a hunting knife that wins over the man's heart. He asks for the price, and seeing that the customer likes the hunting knife too much, Kenichi prices it at a gold coin. While the man debates if he should buy the splendid knife for a high price, a cat-eared furry appears before Kenichi and starts sniffing him. He is taken aback by this because he is not into furries, and then the cat girl licks his nose. Just then, her friends come there and smack her for misbehaving, and Kenichi finds that they are authentic furries. He gets freaked out on seeing them and then makes an excuse that he has never seen any beast folks before so that he doesn't sound racist. The cat people want mats like he has placed on the top of his stall, and Kenichi does the calculation for them. They start staring him down because they don't trust anyone who does math too fast. But when the blonde guy assures them that Kenichi's math is legit, they take the deal. Anama tells Kenichi that beast folk are dyslexic when it comes to math, so he shouldn't mind them. On the other hand, the blonde guy is also impressed by Kenichi's honesty with the naive beast folk, and he decides to buy the sword from him. Kenichi then returns to the inn and gets a better room with the profit he has earned in a day. He begins to think about the system window and the shopping app and wonders how it even works. He doesn't understand anything even after trying, so he calls it a day and goes to sleep. A couple of days later, Kenichi decides to sell some cheap jewelry, hoping that it is attractive enough to some rich lady. Anama is quite impressed with the collection herself, and she asks Kenichi about his supplier, but he tells her it is a secret. Just then, a maid who bought the cloth clips yesterday comes to Kenichi's shop again, and she orders 100 clips at once. Kenichi is surprised by the huge order, but he is glad to get more business. As he is busy counting the clips, the maid begins eyeing the jewelry. Kenichi tells her that each necklace costs 6 small silver coins, and the girl is quite surprised because it is cheaper than she thought. Kenichi offers to keep a necklace reserved for her in case she needs time to decide, and she takes up the offer. The business keeps booming throughout the day, and in the evening, the cat people come to see Kenichi again. He is intimidated by the look on their face, but it turns out they are here to buy some spices from Kenichi. They tell him that the girl has the sharpest nose among them, and she smelled spices on Kenichi last time. They beg him to sell some spices to them because they really like spicy food, but Anama tells them to stop making demands that will put Kenichi on the radar of the spice mafia. Kenichi affirms, saying that he can't sell them any spice, but when the cats grovel before him, he decides to come up with a loophole. Instead of selling them spices, he decides to treat them to spicy food by the riverside, and Anama asks if she can tag along too. He agrees, and then the cats waste no time as they grab Kenichi and run to the river. It is already night by the time they reach the river, and while Kenichi and Anama prep the vegetables and spices, the cats catch some fish for them. Kenichi cooks a spicy curry for them, and the cats love it. They begin craving some alcohol to go with it, and Kenichi has got them covered in that department too. As the cats drink and dance, Anama tells Kenichi that he is too kind and trusting, and that can create problems for him in the future. Kenichi doesn't think too much about it and spends the rest of the night partying with the cat people, and then snuggling with the girl named Mayu. The next morning, as he goes back to his inn, Azalea becomes jealous as she sees Mayu's hair on his shirt, and Kenichi starts fearing that he will no longer get the Gluck Gluck 3000 from her. Anyway, he sets up shop in the same spot again when suddenly, a pretty girl with a gravity-defying plot walks towards him. Kenichi is smitten by her, and then he notices the maid behind her. He asks if she is here to buy the necklace, and she pays him for it. The maid shows the necklace to her master, who is impressed to learn that it is just polished glass and not diamond despite its looks. She takes a look at other necklaces too and asks Kenichi if he has more. He pulls out some more from his item box, and the girl is left speechless. She introduces herself as Primula, the daughter of the owner of the prestigious Mallow Trading Company, and requests Kenichi to meet her father. Kenichi turns to Anama for advice, and she tells him that the owner of the Mallow Company is a good man who is respected by everyone in the city. Kenichi immediately takes up the chance to form connections with a major business group. On the ride to her home, Primula tells Kenichi that she was trying to copy his wooden cloth clips, but her craftsman couldn't get the spring right. Kenichi doesn't mind that because he knows things like this are bound to happen in business. Soon, they reach her mansion, and though Kenichi is impressed by it, Primula tells him that it is nothing compared to the mansion of nobles. Kenichi then meets Primula's dad, Mr. Mallow, who assesses the jewelry he has. He then reveals that he also has an item box, and that was the main reason his business grew so big. After drinking tea and cracking jokes, Mallow gets to business and asks Kenichi to become his company's exclusive supplier. Kenichi asks why he doesn't just buy the items from him for cheap and resell them at a higher price, and Mallow says it would be the most foolish thing he can do as a businessman. He explains that it will hurt his relationship with Kenichi, which he doesn't want. Also, if one of his rivals uses this chance to sign an exclusive contract with Kenichi, it would be the worst thing for him. He says that he believes in building trust with talented merchants to grow together, and then offers Kenichi 50% of the profit from selling the jewelry. Kenichi gladly takes the deal without negotiating and then supplies some pretty brooches to Mallow as his first shipment. However, instead of letting them do business with it, Primula decides to buy them all for herself. She offers Kenichi 10 gold coins for all the brooches, and it takes him a bit of time to realize that he is getting 2 million yen from this deal. Now that he has a fair amount of money to his name, Kenichi decides to get a house outside the city so that he can live a slow and peaceful life. He picks out a nice area near the city border and then purchases a lawnmower to cut the grass and create a rough road. He then buys a gas-powered chainsaw to fell some trees, which takes him all day. He decides to put the trees inside his item box, but they are too big to fit inside. That's what she said. So he cuts them down to smaller pieces and finds that he cannot store anything that is longer than 10 meters. He decides to call it a day with that, and the next morning, he starts digging out the tree stumps from the ground. However, that is much harder than just cutting trees down with a chainsaw, and Kenichi gives up before even exposing the roots of the first tree. He buys a second-hand mini excavator to pull out the tree stumps, but that cost him 1.2 million yen, which is almost half of his total net worth. On top of that, he finds that the excavator needs diesel to run, and they don't sell it online. The closest thing he can find is some camping fuel, but that is much more expensive than normal gas. However, Kenichi has no choice but to keep investing money in the excavator if he doesn't want it to be a piece of junk. He also purchases a diesel generator to see if the camping fuel can power it, and he is successful in running the diesel and the excavator. Later at night, he takes a bath in the river, but the bug bites all over his hands start itching. He remembers Azalea telling him to buy bug-repellent magic stones from the tool store at the edge of the market and goes there the next morning. He finds an old magician who runs the shop, and he is really curious about Kenichi after learning that he is from another country. He tells Kenichi that a bug-repellent stone is worth 3 silver coins, but when Kenichi gives him oranges, a fruit that is not found in this country, the old man knocks down the price to 2 silver coins. Later, Kenichi opens his store again, and Anama tells him that the old man knows a lot of things. She tells him to be on good terms with him because he can help him out with a lot of things. While talking, Kenichi's attention goes to the wanted posters on the wall, and Anama tells him that they recently increased the bounty on Shaga, the leader of the bandits in this area. Kenichi doesn't care much about the bandit guy and returns to his plot after concluding business for the day. Using his excavator, he easily digs out the tree stumps and flattens the area to lay the foundation for his house. However, the problem is that he doesn't have much money in his account after the recent shopping spree, and he needs to save a lot before starting to build his dream house. To earn some cash quickly, Kenichi goes to Mallow's house with powdered sugar kept in the same pot that he used to keep his grandma's ashes. Mallow snorts the sugar and thinks that it is a high-quality product, but unfortunately, he cannot buy it. He explains that the country holds the exclusive right to buy sugar and salt, so Kenichi can't sell it to others. He gets depressed on hearing that, but then Malo tells him that the jewelry is getting popular among the nobles, so Kenichi decides to deal in only that for now. He gives some brooches to Malo, and that earns him 15 gold coins, which equals 3 million yen. That is more than enough for him to purchase a log cabin online, and he orders it without even reading the details. Only after a pile of wood lands in front of him, he realizes that he has to build the cabin himself. Depression hits him again, but he feels better after reading the instructions and decides to assemble the cabin by himself because it seems easy enough. Luckily, the cat people pass through the area soon, and they decide to help him to repay him for sharing the delicious meal with them earlier. Even with their help, it takes Kenichi almost a month to build the cabin while maintaining his business on the side. He throws a barbecue party for the cat people on the completion of his house, and then goes inside to plop on his bed that is pretty much the only thing in the cabin. After that, he starts working on furnishing his house, and it takes him another month and a lot of money. He makes a wooden fence to surround the house and garden. He then buys a portable bathroom to compost his shit into manure. He also installs the plumbing in the house by himself and then purchases solar panels and batteries so that he can have a constant supply of electricity. As the cherry on the top, he purchases a bath tank and enjoys his first hot bath since coming to this world. After his home is fully furnished, Kenichi goes to the inn and tells Azalea that he has his own place now, so he won't be staying here. He thanks her for everything, and she is left speechless because she didn't think he would move away so soon. The next morning, Kenichi rides his cycle into the forest and with the help of a DSLR he recently purchased, clicks pictures of the flowers that he has never seen before. Suddenly, an arrow hits his bike and he crashes onto the ground. Before he can even process what is happening, more arrows come towards him, but luckily he dodges all of them. As he hides behind a tree, he hears some forest-dwelling beast folk talking about him. They don't like Kenichi because he built a house near the forest, and they decide to kill him so that he doesn't bother them. Kenichi realizes that he doesn't have to play nice with these racist pricks, so he uses all the weapons in his arsenal. He first shoots them with his slingshot, and even though his accuracy is really low, the damage is enough to knock down the beast folk in one hit. He then throws some fireworks to intimidate them and then summons his excavator to send them running. He then decides to head back home, when suddenly, he hears someone crying behind the bushes. He goes to see who is it, and to his surprise, it is a huge purple cat, who has been injured by the arrows of the beast folk. Kenichi wants to help it, but he is worried that he may get bitten, so he purchases some cushions and ties them around his arm and neck. He then pulls out the arrow from the cat's body, and it doesn't try to fight him, so he realizes that he can treat it further. He then sanitizes its wound with alcohol and then applies antiseptic cream before giving the cat some painkillers. However, he is not sure if the cat can survive being out in the wild, so he takes it home. He grows concerned when the cat doesn't even move, and the next morning, he goes to the old wizard to ask if there is a way to heal it using magic. The old wizard calls him crazy for trying to save a bobcat and suggests he sell its skin instead. Kenichi doesn't want to do that, and then the cat girl Mayu finds him. She learns the story and tells him that bobcats are considered messengers of God among her people, and she wants to see it. Kenichi takes her to his place and finds that the wild bobcat has become a little active. To thank him for saving the cat, Mayu hunts some birds, and then gives him the Gluck Gluck 2000 at night. After a few days have passed, the bobcat is fully healed, and Kenichi lets it out in the wild. He takes some time off from his shop after that, and instead focuses on farming. Since he needs a lot of water for that, he decides to dig a well for his own use, and it takes him about a week to do that. Just as he is about to take a bath, Primula comes there looking for him. She says that she was worried because he had not opened his shop in a while, but thankfully Mayu told her about his house. She is surprised on seeing the things around the house though, especially the excavator. Kenichi can't tell her the truth, so he says that it is his familiar, and asks her to keep it a secret that he can use magic. Primula believes him and agrees to keep his secret safe, and then Kenichi realizes that it is already past time for the city gates to be closed. Primula tells him that she will stay at his place, and she has no issue at all about sharing a bed with him. Just then, her gaze goes to the water-filled drum, and on learning that it is a bath, her face lights up. She takes a bath soon, but gets scared on hearing the sound of wild animals and asks Kenichi to stay close to her. After that, he gives her a bathrobe and a night dress, and Primula senses huge business potential in both these items. She tells Kenichi that he should sell them because they would be really popular among the nobles, but he tells her that he doesn't want to do anything with those inbreeding assholes who think they own the world. He then makes a sketch of Primula to riz her up, which makes her really happy, but she doesn't give him the chance to clap those cheeks. The next day, as they ride a carriage to the city, Kenichi wonders how is he going to explain to Mallow that he spent a night with his daughter, but luckily, Mallow is an open-minded person, so he doesn't ask anything about it. They go inside and Kenichi shows Mallow the towels and nightgowns on Primula's insistence. The businessman is really impressed by that, and then Kenichi decides to show him some sensuous lingerie that will be a hit among women who want to seduce someone. Mallow facepalms, thinking that his daughter wore this last night when she stayed over at Kenichi's place, but he tells her that he was just joking and puts it away. Just then, the maid comes there with their ledgers because the kingdom is changing the method in which business records are kept. Mallow explains that recently, the technique called double bookkeeping is being made popular all over the country, thanks to a certain man who has lately influenced a lot of their kingdom's policies. That is obviously a term from the modern world, and Kenichi begins suspecting the man who invented this system here. After that, Mallow takes him outside to show him the new product his company is working on, and to his surprise, it is a hand pump. Mallow says that it is also a new item that is gaining popularity in the market, so he wanted to build it before his rivals. After seeing the hand pump, Kenichi is certain that there is someone else in this world from the modern world. After that day, Primula starts coming over to Kenichi's house often, and sometimes she stays the night. On one such night, she tells him that she has to go on a purchase run for 1 month tomorrow, and she came here before that for something important. She asks Kenichi to show her the racy lingerie he showed her father as a joke earlier, and he asks who does she want to seduce it with. She begins flushing red as she tells him that she wants to take a chance on him, but Kenichi tells her to find someone closer to her age. Primula says that she is fine with the age gap, and even her father approves of him. This gives Kenichi a headache because he doesn't want to make any serious commitments now, but he still allows Primula to cuddle with him all night. The next morning, after she leaves, the blonde knight who once bought a hunting knife from Kenichi comes to his house and introduces himself as Paul. He says that he is here to investigate complaints about a shady man living in the forest, and though he trusts Kenichi, he is suspicious about the solar panels. Kenichi says that they are related to magic and then asks him to keep it a secret. Paul tells him that his silence will cost him, so Kenichi gives him some high-quality steel bars to forge swords and a bottle of wine. Paul is so impressed by him that he decides to tell him about a unique magician in the capital who has the power to summon a sauce called mayo, and he can also defeat a dragon with that. Kenichi is shocked to hear that, but now he is even more certain that this mysterious magician is from Earth. A month passes after that, and Kenichi waits for Primula to return from her shopping trip because he has been looking forward to see her again. Suddenly, he hears a commotion in the city square, and then Primula's maid comes running to his shop to tell him about the emergency. Primula's caravan was attacked by bandits in the forest, and she has been kidnapped. Her father has gone crazy because of that, and he is begging the city adventurers to rescue his daughter in the middle of the street. However, no one is ready to face Shaga, the notorious leader of the bandits, and they leave the old man to his own methods. The bystanders understand why no one dares to help Mallow, because Shaga has a gang of 50 ruthless bandits. Kenichi can just watch the hopeless merchant beg people for help and wonders if he can do anything for him. Meanwhile, the bandit Shaga locks Primula in a cell, and she confronts him without fear, asking what does he plan to do with her. Shaga tells her that he likes her confidence and he would want to do her raw, but unfortunately, he needs to sell her to a rich noble in peak condition. Back in the city, Mallow is begging random people to save his daughter, and he eventually ends up clinging to Kenichi's feet. Kenichi starts thinking about Primula, and he gets overwhelmed by his emotions as he tells Mallow that he will do something about the matter. He realizes that he said something way out of his league, but he just can't let Primula be harmed. He decides to use the shopping app to arrange a way to get her out and asks Mallow if he can give him some money to get things started. Mallow's secretary immediately gives him a bag full of gold coins, and Kenichi uses it to buy a truck to reach Shaga's base quickly. He tells everyone to make space because he is going to use summoning magic, and then begins singing "Fat, Juicy, and Wet" for dramatic effect. With that, he purchases a 2 million yen truck and everyone is dumbfounded. Kenichi climbs on the truck and tells them that this carriage does only what he says, so they don't need to be afraid. He then asks for any volunteers who want to ride his carriage and launch a surprise attack on Shaga to take him down. But no one is willing to risk their lives. Suddenly, the bobcat Kenichi saved earlier comes to the truck to accompany him, and soon, MYA and the other cat people also come there because they owe him one. Kenichi immediately purchases modern weapons for them and then says that he enchanted them with magic to make them lighter and more durable. Soon, the knight Paul also comes there and tells Kenichi that he wants to join his squad because he is a glory hunter and wants to take down the notorious bandits to get famous. After that, the old man from the general store comes there and tells Kenichi that he will also join them. Kenichi initially dismisses the old man, saying that he is going to need medical help before they even reach their destination. But the old man reveals that he used to be a decent adventurer back in the day. He uses fire magic to show that he still has the dog in him, and Kenichi has no problem letting him in. The next volunteer is even more shocking for him because it is Anama, who says she can't fight, but she can at least give first aid and moral support. Kenichi decides to take the old woman along because why not, and then asks if anyone else wants to join them. The mob disperses because they are not even interested, but Mallow asks Kenichi to take him along. Kenichi tells the old man to stay home because someone needs to prepare for Primula's welcome. After that, Ken registers as an adventurer and takes the quest to defeat Shaga. He then drives off to Shaga's base uncertain if he will even return alive. But then he remembers the inspirational words from God D. Usopp, who said that there comes a time when a man must fight, knowing he may lose. Meanwhile, Primula meets a slave girl in the bandit camp who brings her food. Primula realizes that the girl is even more hungry than her, so she tells her to eat the bread and then says that they should get out of this place together when help arrives. At the same time, Ken and his group have reached halfway to Shaga's base, and they take a break to stock up on some calories before the fight begins. After eating, Ken explains his strategy to everyone, and they agree with his plan. Anama suddenly realizes that she will be totally useless on the battlefield, so she decides to stay back. After that, Ken buys a pair of walkie-talkies and gives one to Mayu as he sends her on a recon mission. She locates the old ruins where the bandits are staying, and Ken tells everyone to get ready. He drives off, telling Anama to contact the guild if they don't return within 24 hours and tell them that the quest to subdue the bandits failed. It is night by the time they reach near the bandit base, and Mayu reports that a lot of bandits are drunk silly. Everyone gets ready to fight, but the Catmen know that Ken has never killed a person before, so they give him something that can help him. They ask him to take a bite of the nut, and as soon as Ken does that, he realizes that the nut was this world's version of magic snow powder. He goes batshit crazy on experiencing the first high of his boring life and drives like he taught Vin Diesel. Soon, the truck reaches near the castle, and as the guards are distracted by its lights, Mayu shoots them down. Next, they reach the castle's entrance, and the old mage blows up the gate with magic. The bandits are shocked by that, but they are too drunk to react in time as Ken's truck enters their base. Ken asks the old mage to hit them with another powerful magic, but old age has turned him into a one-pump chump. The cats see this as their chance to step up, and they attack the drunk bandits who are soft targets for them. After them, Paul also steps out oozing main character vibes and kills the bandits effortlessly with his giant sword. One bandit sneaks behind Ken to attack him, but the bobcat and Mayu cover his ass. Suddenly, more bandits come out from within the ruins, and Ken decides it is time to join the battle. He summons his excavator and gets on it, driving it towards the bandits and massacring them with the metal claw. The bandits start getting beaten on all sides, and they retreat, realizing they can't win against the metal monster. Ken decides to dig into the building to see if he can find Primula and opens a hole in one of the cells where other girls are being held prisoner. The slave girl is with them too, and as she sees Ken controlling the excavator, she thinks that God himself has come to help her. Ken peeps out of the excavator to see that Primula is not with the women, and then Shaga tells him to look up because he has the girl hostage right now. He tells Ken and others to stay down if they don't want Primula to die, and then tears her clothes, saying that if he knew this would happen, he would have already had his fun with her. Primula is grossed out by the bandit, but Ken remains calm and comes up with a plan. He purchases a military-grade laser pointer and then softly talks to Mayu, telling her to follow the red dot on Shaga's body, and when he is blinded by it, it will be their chance to attack. He takes the laser pointer gradually up Shaga's body, and before he can even suspect that something is wrong, the laser hits his eye, blinding him. Mayu immediately shoots him, but her arrow only hits Shaga's shoulder. Primula rushes to Ken's side and Shaga tries to attack her rather than letting her go, but a powerful magic force pushes him to the side and throws him down the building. He finds that he is right in front of Mayu, and this time she hits a headshot, killing him. At the same time, Primula reaches Ken and hugs him. He is still under the effect of the magic nut and feels the sword between his legs rising, but somehow controls his urges. After that, he sends one of the cat men to inform Anama that they succeeded. Next, he digs up a well for the girls who were kept by bandits and arranges for clothes to wear after they take a bath. Meanwhile, he finds the slave girl lying on top of the bobcat, so he asks Primula to give her a bath too. He then buys a pair of hairstyling scissors to cut her hair, and the capitalist bitch Primula sees a business opportunity in it instantly. She clings to Ken, not noticing that she just dropped her towel, and asks if they can sell it in the market. The other girls remind her that she dropped her towel, and Primula instantly runs back to cover herself. After everyone is done cleaning up, Ken buys a cute dress for the girl who introduces herself as Anne. She also finds the letter from the noble who told Shaga to kidnap Primula, which makes everyone realize why the guild was so reluctant about taking the case. Next, they go to pick Anama up, and she gets emotional as she sees that they are all alive. They return to the bandits' hideout to spend the night, and Ken falls asleep with Primula and Anne sleeping next to him. The next day, Ken returns to the city with Primula and others by his side. Mallow and others are eagerly waiting for them, and as Primula comes out of the truck, she immediately runs to hug her dad. However, their emotional reunion is cut short when Mallow notices that Primula is wearing some high-end clothes that Ken gave her, and these capitalists start thinking about doing business with them. After that, Mallow comes over to thank Ken for rescuing his daughter, and then asks if he has brought the loot in his item box. Ken nervously affirms because he knows that the loot Mallow is talking about is actually something terribly gross and bloody. He remembers the moment before they set out to the city, and how the cat adventurers told him to put the heads of the bandits he had killed in his item box because the guild will need to verify their faces before giving him his reward. Ken was grossed out at this idea, but for the cat adventurers, it was another Tuesday, and they chopped off the heads of the bandits and threw their bodies into a giant bonfire. As he watched them do this brutal operation without even flinching, Mayu latched onto his back and told him that he was lucky to have the item box, because it would be a hassle to carry these dead bodies back to the city normally, and they would start to smell within a day. Ken was horrified to hear this, and he wondered if he could ever get to live the peaceful life he always dreamt of. Anyway, he went ahead and put all the valuable items that the bandits were hoarding into his item box too, and after that, he talked to the women they had imprisoned. He offered to drive them home, but some of them told him that their families were already killed by the bandits before they were abducted. Ken felt bad for them and suggested that they should come to his city because they would be able to find work there. Primula also offered to help them using her connections. Next, Ken asked Anne about her village and learned that it was 800 kilometers away from here, but she didn't want to go back anyway. Anama realized that she was probably sold off by her family, so Ken decided to take her with them. He dropped all the women that still had their families waiting for them near their villages, and after reuniting Primula with Mallow, he goes straight to the Adventurers Guild. The other adventurers are with him too, and as Ken places Shaga's head on the reception desk, the receptionist freaks out and tells him to throw it away. Another guy comes to deal with the issue and calls Ken to another part of the guild to verify the bounties he collected. Ken places the 50 heads on the tables, shocking the guild employees. They call for every man who can handle blood and gore to help with the verification, and Ken finally heaves a sigh of relief on getting the heads out of his item box. The old wizard comes up to him and says that he has some unique types of magic and his item box has a large capacity too. He fears that if the nobles learn about that, they won't leave Ken alone, and he says that if it comes to that, he will simply flee the city. Just then, the Knight Paul comes there and tells Ken that he is going to report to the local lord about the involvement of some noble in the kidnapping. It takes all day to verify the bounties, and in the end, Ken gets over 800 gold coins for all of them. He goes to Anama to give her a share, but she refuses to take anything because she didn't even help. However, she requests Ken to let him care for Anne because she reminds her of her daughter who died during the plagues. Ken has no problem with that, and he leaves the girl in Anama's care. He then shares the reward with the rest of the people who joined him on the rescue mission, and decides to spend the night in the city because he is too tired to go home. He goes to the inn where his old side chick Azalea works. She is happy to see him and asks if it is true that he defeated a bunch of bandits, but he lies that it is false because he knows that this gold digger is just after his money. Azalea clings to him despite that because she knows that his business is booming and tells him to be her permanent sugar daddy. Ken refuses and goes to a room to rest, but soon Azalea sneaks in to give him some surprise raw action. However, they can't do anything because Anne and the Bobcat also get inside the room, and in the end, Ken has to sleep blue-balled with Anne next to him. The next day, he takes the girl to the place where Anama sets up shop, but surprisingly, she is not there. The cat people haven't seen her either, so Ken decides to keep Anne by his side till he finds the old lady. He then goes to a weapons shop and sells all the weapons and armor he got from the bandits' hideout for 32 gold coins. Next, he sells all the valuable items to Mallow's company for 35 gold coins, and all the items left after that are sold to the old wizard for 22 gold coins. Ken decides to distribute them among his party members as well, and then heads back home along with Anne. To his surprise, Anama is already there. She hugs Anne as soon as she sees her and says that she was worried sick about her. They go inside, where Anne says that she wants to stay with Ken, and no matter what Anama tells her, she refuses to change her decision. Anama respects her decision and heads to the city alone, and then Ken asks Anne why she wants to stay with him. She says that he was the first person to feed her till she was full, and he decides to have an early dinner for her sake. They eat together, and then Anne insists on bathing and sleeping with Ken as well, and he has to agree to her demands. As they sleep together, a group of mysterious people circle around the house, but vanish without doing anything. Soon, a month passes, and things have changed a lot. Paul has become a noble after his role in defeating Shaga. The noble who tried to get Primula kidnapped also lost his position and wealth. Ken told Primula and Mallow about bicycles, and though they initially laughed at his design, they saw the potential in it and bought the design from him. Now bicycles have started appearing on the roads of the city. Ken has finally received the reward for hunting the bandits from the guild, and he distributes it to everyone who helped him and gives the spare change to the women they rescued, who are now working at Primula's company. He pays a visit to Anama too, but then he notices that someone has been following him since earlier. He tries to get away from the stalker as soon as possible, but soon gets cornered by the robed men. He immediately heads into a narrow alley and throws stuff on the way to slow them down. But their carriage blocks the exit of the alley, and he finds that there is no way out now. The robed men catch up to him and tell him to get inside because their employer wants to meet him. They tell him that he won't be able to summon his giant metal beast inside the carriage, and Ken appears to cooperate with them. But then he summons some fireworks and throws them all around the place. The robed men are started by this, and Ken and Anne crawl under the carriage to reach the main street. The men draw their swords, but Ken also pulls out a crossbow and tells them to stop. Realizing that everyone has seen them, the stalkers decide to retreat, and within seconds, Mallow comes there with his carriage to rescue Ken. He tells him that this is probably the work of some noble from the anti-monarchy faction, and suggests him to meet the local lord regarding this matter because he is not a bad guy. However, Ken thinks that if he meets the lord, he will ask him to pay taxes, and that is the one thing he doesn't want to do. Mallow drops him at the city gate, and Ken decides that it is time for him to say goodbye to this city. Meanwhile, Mallow returns home and tells Primula that Ken is probably going to leave the city because things have gotten a bit complicated for him here. She decides to follow him no matter where he goes, and the next morning, she runs to his house, only to find that Ken has already left and he has taken his entire house with him. She is heartbroken and devastated because she thought that they had a genuine connection and he would wait for her, but it turned out to be her delusion. Anyway, Ken is riding a bike, taking Anne and the bobcat with him. He runs into the merchant Fuyu whom he first met when he came to this city. He stops to chat with him, and Fuyu bombards him with questions about this ride and the girl. Ken tells him that Anne and the bobcat are his family, and they are going on a journey across the country to find a place to live a peaceful life. Many days have passed since Ken and his group started their journey, and now they are quite close to another major city. Ken catches some fish from the river and makes some fish meatballs out of them for lunch, and then uses a drone to find out how the terrain is ahead. He sees a huge lake at the end of the river and thinks that the city must be on the other side of the lake. Ken doesn't want to live in the proper city, so he tours the banks of the river and finds a suitable spot to live. He clears and levels the area with the excavator and then pretends to use a magic spell to summon his house out of the item box. After that, he decides to name the bobcat Vel because it is going to live with them for a while. He resumes the slow life he could not live in the previous city and starts teaching Anne to read and write. While she practices reading and writing, he buys some smut books online and begins reading them. Anne comes to ask what is he doing, and he simply tells her that he is reading books, and that makes her want to read the books too. Ken tells her that it is in a different language, but Anne is eager to learn the language of his country. In the end, Ken purchases a few children's books for her and starts teaching her Japanese. The next day, he sets up his solar panels when he suddenly senses someone approaching him. Thinking that it could be a monster, Ken pulls out his crossbow and turns around. But to his surprise, the unexpected guest is actually the furry girl Mayu. She leaps at Ken, who doesn't understand how she arrived here. Mayu tells him that she followed the scent of the bobcat and chased after his bike so that she could live with him. Ken takes her in, and Anne is thrilled to find that Mayu is going to live with them from now on. Later, as they are having lunch, Ken asks Mayu about the status of the city after he left. She tells him that everything was normal, but Paul proposed to Primula. Ken is surprised to hear this, and though he is a bit hurt that Primula turned out to be a gold digger, he thinks that it is the best for her to marry someone young with power. At night, Anne shows Mayu the picture books that Ken has bought for her, and the cat girl is thrilled to see them because they don't have many books like these in this world. This gives Ken the idea of selling picture books, but he doesn't want them to contain stories from his world. He asks Anne and Mayu if there are any fairy tales they know of, and Anne tells him about the story of the elf and the human prince. According to the story, the elf and the human prince fall in love with each other, but neither of their people are happy about their union. They attack the couple and almost kill them, but at the last moment, the fairies intervene and teleport the lovers to a safe place in the forest where they live happily ever after. Ken likes the idea, and the next day, he starts his printing business and creates 2 black and white picture books with the story he heard last night. He gives 1 copy each to Anne and Mayu, and they are delighted to receive them. Suddenly, Ken notices a boat coming towards them, and he immediately tells Mayu and Anne to get inside in case the people are dangerous. He then rushes to the lake with his crossbow and tells the people in the boat to stop and identify themselves. The man tells him not to shoot because he is not here to harm him. He says that they live in the village across the lake, and just came here to check if the people living here were bandits. Ken shows him merchant ID to clear his doubts and explains that he carries weapons because there was some trouble in the last city he visited. Suddenly, the bobcat comes there and starts cuddling with Ken, and seeing this, the catman who was rowing the boat becomes sure that Ken is a good man. His partner agrees with him too, and then introduces himself as Crouton. He comes up to see Ken's house and decides to buy a picture book for his daughter. Ken spends the next few days gathering medicinal herbs around the region and breaking the limits of species as he and Mayu do grown-up exercises in the woods. He also starts working on making biodiesel from waste to lower the amount he spends on fuel, and it is a success. Once that is done, he decides to visit the nearby city, and Mayu guides him because she has been there many times. They go to the Adventurers Guild first, and Ken can't take his eyes off the receptionist's jugs, making both Mayu and Anne angry. He gives her his guild ID so that he can register here, and the receptionist freaks out on learning that he is the guy who took down Shaga. Ken asks her to keep it a secret because he doesn't want to draw undue attention, and with that, he finishes registering at the new city. Later, as they are trying the food stalls in the market, Ken sees Crouton and his daughter nervously going into some dark streets, but he doesn't concern himself with their private matters. Next, he explores the market and comes to a shop run by an old wizard lady. There, he finds a weird magic tool that basically separates the useful part from any liquid from the useless part. Ken realizes he can use it to make biodiesel quickly and more easily, so he immediately buys it for 5 gold coins. In the meantime, Anne picks up a book, but the old lady tells her that it is a magic book and she should keep it back. The inner weeb inside Ken wakes up on hearing about a magic book, and even though the old lady tells him that not everyone has the talent to use magic, he decides to buy it to try his luck. He is about to give learning magic a try immediately, but the woman tells him that all magic books need to be registered when they are sold, so he should come back in a week to pick it up. They leave the shop with that and run into Crouton's cat friend, who seems to be in a hurry. Ken thinks something is fishy, and then he sees some thugs looking for someone, further increasing his uneasiness. He doesn't want any part of this mess, but just then, he hears a girl screaming and finds that the thugs have cornered Crouton and his daughter. They are about to attack him, and Anne pleads with Ken to save them. He doesn't want any trouble, but he can't show his pathetic side to Anne either, so he asks Mayu to look after her as he goes ahead to stop the thugs. He buys a plague doctor mask to scare them just with his vibes, and then throws firecrackers at them, saying that it is his powerful magic that can turn them into ashes. The thugs crap their pants and run away, and then Ken removes his mask to tell Crouton that he is safe. Suddenly, his cat friend also comes there and apologizes for being late, but he is relieved to see Crouton and the girl safe. They go to the town square to catch a breath, and Crouton reveals that he used to be a government officer and arrested some people from the Spice Mafia. The Spice Mafia has held a grudge against him ever since, and the people that attacked him today were from the same group. Ken says that all's well that ends well, and then Crouton introduces his daughter Mary to the merchant who sold the picture book. Mary thanks Ken for the book, and Anne boasts that she helped in making the book. Mary also wants to help now, and Anne requests Ken on her behalf. He agrees because Mary is Anne's first friend who is around her age, and invites her to their home. A couple days later, Crouton comes there with his entire family. Mary and Anne become really close over the meeting, and after that, they visit each other a lot and help Ken make new picture books. Then one day, Crouton comes running to Ken's house and places a pouch full of money on his doorsteps, begging him to sell him some medicine because Mary has caught a fever. He says that the illness is local to this region, and most people who catch it don't last even a full day. Anne gets worried on hearing this, and Mayu suggests that they should ask the wizard lady to use healing magic. Crouton says that he doesn't have enough money to hire her, but Ken tells him that he will do something. He purchases a fever medicine for kids and gives it to Crouton so that Mary's fever remains under control, while he leaves to bring the wizard to their house. They reach the house quite late in the night, and the old woman says that healing magic can't cure this disease, and the only known medicine that works on it is made from the seeds of a white flower found near the spring in the middle of the forest. Ken decides to head there immediately, and Crouton and his cat friend also tag along. However, they don't notice that the thugs from earlier have located Crouton's home, and they see this as a chance to get their revenge. Meanwhile, Ken and Crouton soon reach the spring from where the river originates, and begin looking for the special white flower. Crouton's cat friend notices someone is coming towards them, and Ken immediately pulls out his crossbow for self-defense, but luckily, it is just his pet bobcat Vel. Ken then purchases an inflatable lifeboat and goes towards the center of the spring, where he finds the white flowers. He quickly collects their cores and hands them over to Crouton, when Vel and the cat guy feel some hostile beasts approaching them. As the monsters surround them from all sides, Ken realizes they are the wild wolves that he once dealt with in the past. He knows that they don't have any time to waste, So he buys a pair of swords and gives them to Crouton and his friend, telling them to break through the wolves and head home as quickly as possible. He decides to stay back to stop the wolves, but Crouton doesn't think it is a safe idea. Ken tells him to worry more about his daughter right now, and then throws a powerful firework at the wolves, pushing them back. He keeps driving them away with the loud fireworks, and Crouton heads back home. However, the wolves quickly change their direction and begin heading towards him instead. Ken wonders why are the wolves targeting Crouton, and it turns out that the thugs that want revenge against him are behind it. One of them is using a dog whistle to control the wolves, and while Ken and others are fighting the wolves, Vel spots the thugs. She attacks them and takes down the dog man controlling the wolves, giving Crouton and his friend the chance to run away. By the time the dog man gets his whistle back, Crouton is already out of the wolves' range. Suddenly, the ground starts rumbling and the wolves run away as the big daddy of all the monsters in the forest comes out. The ferocious horned bear knocks out the dog man with one slap and his partners piss their pants and run away. The bear then turns its attention towards Ken, who is this close to crapping himself, but he manages to summon his crossbow and land a lucky shot on the bear's eye. Using this chance, Vel attacks the bear, but she can't do much damage. Ken decides to scare the bear by throwing a lot of high-power fireworks at it, but he misses his shot. However, he has the plot armor active today, and the bear grabs the bombs with its mouth. The bombs explode within its mouth, dealing serious damage to it, and the rest is a piece of cake. Ken quickly summons his excavator, lands a full-winded blow on the bear's head to kill it, and then stores it in his item box. He then sees the dog man passed out on the ground, and after that, he quickly rides back to Crouton's home. He finds that Mary is out of danger now, and Crouton sincerely thanks him for saving his daughter's life. Ken asks Crouton to come out for a private chat, and explains that he saved the dog man earlier and got him to promise that he won't attack Crouton or his family again. The dog man agreed, but he also said that there are many people with grudges against Crouton, and if he wants to be safe, he should just move to another place. Crouton says that he doesn't have any place to go because any city that has a spice cartel will be dangerous for him. Ken has an idea about that, and he suggests Crouton to go to the territory of Paul, who is a new noble and thus he needs people. He says that he can write a letter of introduction and assures Crouton that Paul is a good guy, and he decides to talk to his family about it. The next day, Ken tells Mayu and Anne about what happened last night. After that, Crouton and his cat friend leave for Paul's territory to get themselves settled, while Mary and her mother stay back till she is fully recovered. As Ken and Mayu are outside the house, they suddenly sense someone nearby, and Ken finds it is the dog guy from yesterday, and he is here to inform them that he kept his promise and killed some people that were out to harm Crouton. After that, Ken goes to the Adventurer Guild to sell all the parts of the bear monster he hunted except the magic stone and its meat. But the butcher tells him that it will take a few hours to get it processed. Ken decides to come back later for it, but as he is passing through the market, he gets chills down his spine for some reason he doesn't know. The truth is that Primula is here looking for him, and she was just inside the shop near Ken. He decides to shake away that feeling and goes home to use the magic device he bought from the old lady to create biodiesel quickly. It works perfectly, and then Ken goes to the market for other tasks. First, he collects the magic book from the wizard granny, and then goes to the guild to collect the meat and the money for the parts of the bear. As he is heading back home, Primula spots him in the market, and Ken immediately feels the chills once again. He wonders if someone is targeting his life, and decides to go home quickly. But then Primula grabs his arm, and he fears that his life is going to end now. However, when he turns around and sees Primula's angry face, he gets even more scared for some reason. He asks her what is she doing here, and Primula suddenly hugs him, calling his cruel and heartless for leaving without saying goodbye. He replies that it would have caused troubles for her company if he was caught by nobles, but Primula tells him that it was not his responsibility. Ken finds that everyone is staring at them, so he says that they should talk somewhere in private, and Primula brings him to the hotel she is staying at. There, she keeps yapping about how much he has done for their family, including getting them a family name because of the bicycles they sold. After she finishes, Ken asks about her rumored marriage to Paul, and Primula says that she turned his proposal down. She tells him that Anama and the old wizard were also upset that he left without saying goodbye, and Ken says that the situation was a bit demanding. He asks her to return to the city and tell everyone that he is fine, but Primula says that she is here to take him back. Ken nervously tells her that he has no plans to go back, and Primula says that she won't return home either in that case. He asks how did she even find him, and Primula explains that she kept contacting the guild to see if he registered at another city. The moment she found that he was here, she got a carriage and set out to see him. She then aggressively demands Ken to put a baby in her right now, and she is in no mood to listen to his excuses about the age gap. Ken can't say no to that, and he immediately goes to her room, and they go at it all night long like animals in heat. The next morning, Ken returns home with Primula, and Anne is really pissed that he brought a woman back home. It seems Primula doesn't like her either, and Ken realizes it is going to be tough to handle them from now on. Primula is also jealous that Ken brought two furries with him instead of a proper woman like her, but he convinces her that they followed him on their own. Anyway, after getting Primula settled in, Ken decides to try his hand at learning magic, but he has no talent for that. He gets disappointed and wonders if he can sell the magic book, and Primula tells him that he can easily sell them to collectors. While Ken is thinking about that, Anne takes the magic book and begins reciting the spell. Suddenly, a large amount of magic power is released from her body, and before Ken can stop her, she unleashes the fireball spell, setting the wall in front of her on fire and shocking everyone. Anne steps back in horror on seeing the results of her magic, while Ken panics and immediately purchases fire extinguishers from his shopping app. He tells Primula and Mayu to copy what he does, and together, they manage to put out the fire. Ken then turns towards Anne, who is feeling terribly guilty for setting the wall on fire, but he doesn't mind it at all. He is really amazed that she could use magic, but as he is expressing his excitement, Anne suddenly collapses. Ken immediately takes her to her bed, and fortunately, she only has a mild fever. The next morning, he buys some canned peaches for her to snack on while she rests. Mayu and Primula also have a taste of canned peaches, and they are really surprised by it because nobles have a monopoly on sugar and only they can eat things like these. A couple of days later, Anne is perfectly healthy and even her friend Mary makes a full recovery. Ken decides to invite Mary and her mom over for lunch and grills the meat of the bear monster he hunted the other day. However, everyone begins complaining that the meat is too tough and has a bad smell, so he decides to cook it in another way. He first pounds the meat till it is soft and tender, and then coats it with his special sauce so that all the girls enjoy it. Next, he makes a curry using the bear meat, and once everyone is full, he lets Mary and Anne help him make picture books. Primula is seeing the picture books for the first time, and she is really amazed by them. She suddenly has a bout of inspiration that makes her believe that she can even get the attention of the royal family if she begins selling books. She tells Ken that she wants to start a business in this town, and he is a bit taken aback because he knows how dedicated she can get when it comes to doing business. He asks her what does she plan to sell apart from books, and Primula says she can sell the stews that she learned to cook from him. Mary's mother says that she also wants to repay Ken, who has done a lot for their family, by helping his wife, and offers to become a waitress in her restaurant. Primula is overjoyed that the woman thinks she is Ken's wife, and she happily takes the offer. The next day, Ken drives Primula to the city with a portable food stall so that she can start her first business from scratch, and Mary and her mother are there to help her. The delicious stew she serves immediately draws in a lot of customers, but then some scammers also come there. They begin yelling at the women for selling food with bugs in it, and try to pressure them to give them a full refund. On the other hand, Ken is busy exploring the area around his house with the help of a drone. He tries looking for any valuable medicinal herbs he can sell, but before that, Anne spots some colorful rocks at the cliffside. Ken thinks that they must be minerals that he can sell for a good price, but they are too high above his range and he has no idea how to mine them. Soon, he notices that it is evening, so he drives to the city to pick Primula. He finds Primula and others outside the gate, and she excitedly tells Ken that they sold out all the stew and the picture books. Ken is impressed by her business skills even though he was the one who made the stew and the books. Suddenly, he notices a new face and asks Primula about the Catwoman who seems to be a part of her group now. Primula starts explaining that earlier in the day, some scammers started pressuring her for a refund, But the Catwoman stepped up and told everyone that she saw the scammers put the bug in the food. They could not fight back against this dominant furry and ran away, and impressed by this, Primula hired her as a bodyguard. Ken thanks the Catwoman Mina for protecting his woman, and she replies that she is the one benefiting the most from this job because it pays her a lot just for staring at idiots who seem looking to cause trouble. After that, Ken brings Mina home along with him because Primula wants to treat her to dinner. This makes Mayu jealous because she wanted to be the only furry in Ken's life, but he assures her that Mina is just a bodyguard. They have dinner after that, and Mina finds the stew really delicious. She begins craving some wine to go with it, and Ken buys the cheapest bottle available online, which is still the best wine the Catwoman has ever tasted. She is already feeling like she came to heaven, and then Ken tells her that they have baths too. Anne suddenly volunteers to heat up the bath using her magic, and she shoots a fireball at the bathtub to heat it to the right temperature instantly. After the bath, Mina lays down on the soft bed and says that she wants to live here forever. But Mayu is against it because they already have too many people here. In the meantime, Ken is teaching Anne math, and he suggests that she work with Primula to learn the basics of business. Anne refuses, saying that she wants to learn magic so that she can help Ken and go on adventures with him. The next day onwards, Primula's business keeps on growing with Mina guarding it from scammers and hustlers. Crouton also sends a letter to his wife to keep her informed about the progress he is making to get settled. On the other hand, Ken creates a huge platform to climb up the cliff wall and mine minerals from it. He decides to invite everyone over on the day he is ready to climb up the cliff, and they begin exploring the area in separate groups. While Mina tells Primula about the edible mushrooms in the forest, Anne and Mary find pretty flowers with Mayu looking after them. In the meantime, Ken uses a drilling machine to mine the pink mineral he saw the other day. He puts it in his item box to learn more about it, and finds that it is a rare mineral called rhodonite, and even one piece is quite valuable. After mining a fair amount of the mineral, Ken calls it a day. He purchases a meat grinder and adds some herbs in the mix to create dumplings that they eat with mayo. Mina has heard about mayo getting famous in the capital after the eccentric wizard created it using magic. Primula asks Ken if he made it using magic too, and he tells her that it is easy to make using eggs and other ingredients. Primula immediately whips out her notebook to write the recipe because she plans to sell it too. Ken tells her that they will talk about it later because he plans to eat the dumplings in peace, but Primula says she is interested in selling them as well. After eating the dumplings, Ken decides to show off with another dish. He takes everyone to the grill outside and cooks bear meat steak marinated in brandy that catches fire on getting heated. Mina finds it more delicious than anything she has ever eaten, and now she is really curious about the alcohol called brandy that Ken used for it. She clings to him as she begs for a sip, and he pours her a glass that gets her drunk instantly. She clings to Ken as she asks for permission to stay over at his place permanently, and Mayu begins to pull her away because she doesn't trust her. However, Ken and Primula think that it won't be a problem to let Mina stay with them because she is a good employee, but Primula warns Ken that if he tries to get too cozy with the furry, he might not like the results. A month later, Primula's business has steadily expanded, and now she owns multiple stalls selling different food items. She has hired many employees too, and a girl named Iris mistakes Ken for Primula's dad. Primula gets pissed on hearing this and clings to Ken as she tells the girl that he is her husband. As time passes, Ken keeps mining the pink mineral, and its total value reaches over 15 million yen. Anne also studies the various types of mushrooms and collects useful ones from the forest above the cliff, while the two furries use it as a hunting ground. Primula's business keeps on growing, and she rents a warehouse in the city to prepare food there. Her estimated annual profit rises to 200 million yen, and Iris becomes the general manager of the branch as the number of the employees rise. Ken wishes that these peaceful and prosperous times continue without any problem, but he is unaware that he has already caught the eye of the queen and the princess. Soon after that, Primula visits the mansion of the Viscount Yupa, who rules over the city, and meets with his wife, who has heard a lot about her business. On the other hand, Ken takes Anne to the old wizard lady's shop, and she tells him that she has an explosion spell book that he could be interested in. Ken remembers the old mage from the previous city using the explosion magic. Being a Konosuba fan, he can never say no to explosion magic. He immediately buys the book, and the old woman throws in a spellbook containing household magic for free since Anne seems interested in it. Later, as they are having dinner, Primula tells Ken that the Viscount's wife wants a beautiful brooch. She once visited the previous city and saw a noblewoman boasting about the brooch she got from the Mallow Trading Company, and that got the woman jealous. Ken already knows how jealous women are when they see someone else with better jewelry, and he immediately purchases a brooch from the online shopping app. Primula finds that the face of a woman is drawn on the brooch, which is already rare in this world, and on top of it, the woman's silhouette matches the Viscount's wife. Ken is not really impressed by that, and he tells Primula that she can tell the rich noblewoman that this brooch was custom made for her and charge her extra money. The next day, after Primula leaves for work with her bodyguard, Mayu tells Ken about a dungeon nearby and suggests that they try to explore it. Ken gets really excited on hearing that dungeons really exist in this world, and he says that Mayu should have told him about them earlier. She complains that she didn't want Mina to hear about it because then she would try to tag along. Well, now Anne has heard about the dungeon, and she wants to come with Ken, who tells her that it will be dangerous because there are many monsters there. Anne throws a tantrum because she is learning magic so that she can go on adventures with Ken, and he is forced to let her tag along. Soon, the three of them along with the bobcat ride out to the dungeon's entrance. Once they enter the dungeon, they find its walls glowing under the torchlight. Everyone is mesmerized by the cave walls and the structures inside the dungeon, and Ken clicks a lot of pictures. Soon, he finds a shimmering crystal poking out from the dungeon's wall, and he immediately summons his drilling machine to take it with him. Anne and others find the loud noise of the drill disturbing, and Ken tells Mayu to take her away for the time being. Suddenly, Mayu smells someone coming towards them, and alerts Ken in time as a giant spider monster comes out of the darkness. Ken immediately summons his crossbow and fires at the spider, but the arrow bounces off its hard skin. Mayu manages to hit the spider's eye in the first try, and Ken realizes that it is the monster's weakness. He asks Anne to aim a fireball at the spider's eyes, but she is shit scared right now and can't even move. The spider shoots some webs at them, and Mayu somehow dodges them all while carrying Anne. Ken realizes that they are not ready to fight the monster right now, so he throws some firecrackers to distract it before summoning his bike and driving away. Once they are outside the dungeon, Ken comforts the nervous Anne, telling her that she did well for her first time. At night, while everyone is taking a bath, Mina learns about Ken's dungeon trip, and she gets angry that Mayu didn't tell her before leaving. Ken tells them to stop fighting because he needs to go back to get his machine and the crystals, and Mina says that she will come with him this time. Ken reminds her that her job is to guard Primula, but Primula says that she is a bit tired, so she will take a few days off. Ken feels something is troubling her, but he doesn't have any time to confirm his doubts because of the other girls. Later, Ken gives Anne the explosion magic book so that she can learn another spell, and she excitedly starts chanting the spell immediately. Ken stops her before this dimwit blows his house for good, and tells her that she should try it when she is feeling better. The next day, Anne begins training to be an adventurer under the guidance of Mayu and Mina. After that, the entire gang heads to the dungeon once again, and they soon find the crystal and Ken's drilling machine next to it. Ken realizes that the spider must have heard the sounds from the machine the last time, and he decides to use it to lure it out again. His trick works, and the giant spider comes out to fight him soon enough. This time, Ken has made arrangements, and he gives the girls bug spray guns to weaken the spider. Once the spider seems weak and dizzy, Anne hits it with a firewall, seriously damaging it. But while everyone is praising her, the spider retreats. Ken decides to chase and finish the monster, and he leads his party through the dungeon. They soon come to an open space where they find the burnt spider in a corner. The girls hit it with the bug spray again, but before Anne can finish it off, the bobcat senses another monster nearby. Everyone turns around to see what is agitating the bobcat, and they are horrified to see a giant one-eyed spider. Mina tells Ken that this one is a female spider, and they are larger and much more dangerous than the males. Ken realizes that there is no way they can beat the female, so he decides to retreat, but the female spider is faster than him, and she blocks the exit, trapping his party in. Bobcat Vel is the first one to take action, and she charges at the spider and slashes her eye to blind her. Ken's group begins shooting bug spray at the female spider after that, and then Anne hits it with a fireball. The female doesn't take much damage despite the attacks, but she doesn't move from its place, either because she plans to trap everyone here till they die. Ken gets pissed at this tactic, but he lets Mayu and Mina shoot bug sprays at the female spider continuously, while he stores the male spider's body in his item box. When he returns, the female spider is still not moving from her place, and Ken decides to bring out the big guns to face her. He begins saying gibberish to make it seem like it is a spell, and then purchases a full-sized excavator worth 9.5 million yen. He sends the cat girls away as he climbs inside the excavator, and Anne follows him so that she can be with him. Ken charges at the spider with the excavator and manages to toss her away. However, the spider still has some strength left, and she attacks him again at the same time the excavator's engine fails. Ken panics as he tries to start the engine, but then Anne takes matters in her own hands. She hits the spider with the explosion spell, dealing serious damage to it. Luckily, Ken manages to turn on the excavator again, and this time, he crushes the giant spider to its death. After that, he puts the excavator and the spider inside his item box, and starts mining some crystals from the dungeon walls to cover up for the expenses of this mission. Soon, they return home and Primula freaks out on seeing the giant spider's corpse. However, that is not the only way Ken is going to shock her tonight, because he plans to cook and eat the egg of the spider. Everyone is disgusted just by listening to the idea, but the cooked egg turns out to be rather delicious, and Primula remarks that its texture is like cheese, which is really hard to make. Ken tells her that cheese is really easy to make, and in doing so, he wakes up the businesswoman inside his wife. Primula insists on learning how to make cheese, and Ken shows her the simplest version of cottage cheese he knows. Even that turns out to be the most delicious thing the girls have eaten, and Primula suddenly requests Ken to teach this recipe to the Viscount's wife. Ken tells her that he doesn't want to get involved with nobles, and it will be better if they sell cheese. Primula looks nervous on hearing that, and then suddenly, Mina tells Ken the reason behind her request. Primula's company is currently being harassed by a powerful and corrupt merchant who runs the spice mafia in this city, and she didn't want to tell Ken about it before she had done everything in her power to deal with him. Ken gets furious on hearing this and says that he can simply crush that bastard with his excavator, but Primula doesn't want that. She wants to fight like merchants do, and that involves getting help from nobles. Ken understands that it is a matter of pride for her, so he allows Primula to do as she pleases. She shares the recipe with the Viscount's wife, who sends out a letter to the corrupt merchant that anyone harassing Primula's company will be punished severely. The bullying stops because of that, and Primula is able to do business as usual. Soon after that, Ken spots a boat coming towards his house, and when he pulls out his binoculars to see who is it, he is shocked to find the Viscountess coming to visit him in person. He and Primula go to greet her, and the Viscountess tells Ken that she has heard a lot about him because he is the man who killed Shaga and his bandits. Ken tries to pretend that she got the wrong guy, but the woman has done her research. Reluctantly, Ken asks her what she wants, and the Viscountess bows before him to make a request, and he realizes that this is not going to be fun. The Viscountess explains that the king has ordered to create a canal that runs through the entire country, and all the nobles have to construct the part that will pass through their territory. Unfortunately, their territory is way behind the schedule, and because of that, her husband was humbled in front of the king. The Viscountess Kenon tells Ken that if they fail to finish the construction in time, they may lose their noble rank and land. She says that a significant part of the canal has to be completed in just 1 month, and she desperately wants Ken to do it in time. She promises to reward him with anything if he can do it, and that includes her body, but Ken refuses that offer because he likes them young. Kenon calms down a bit and says that since Ken is a mage, he must be interested in spellbooks. She says she can give him the rare spell called High Protection, and Mina tells Ken that it is a powerful defensive spell that can even block a dragon's attack. Ken is interested now, and he thinks that it would be great if Anne can use such a spell. He agrees to take the job, and Kenon takes him to her mansion and gives him all the unused furniture as the money needed for the project. That earns Ken over 100 million yen, and he immediately sets out for the construction site in his newly bought sedan. The girls are awestruck on seeing this weird carriage, and the Viscountess turns out to be a thirsty hoe who keeps telling Ken that she will give him her body as a bonus reward, but he keeps on declining. After driving all night, they reach the construction site, and Ken finds that he has a tough job ahead of him because even the forest has not been cleared for the remaining 5 kilometers of the canal. As he tries to calculate the time he will need, Mayu's friends spot him. Ken is surprised to see them working here because they had a lot of money from the bandit hunting trip, but they spent it all. While Mayu is lecturing them about being careless, Mina clings to Ken, and all the catmen are smitten by her. After that, Kenon introduces Ken to the merchants who are supplying them with the materials to construct the canal. They hand over the bill for the items, and Primula takes a peek to find that the merchants are ripping off the Viscountess. She tells them that it is unfair to charge 10 silver coins for one axe, and the merchants tell her that she has no choice but to buy the axes from them because no one else will come here to do business. Primula takes that as a challenge and asks Ken if he can get the same amount of axes that the merchants are bringing. He immediately purchases an axe online and says that it costs only 1 silver coin per piece, which shocks Kenon and the merchants. She immediately decides to buy the supplies from him, but the merchants get angry at that. They remind Kenon that they are from the Fogelum Merchant Company, and she can't afford to make enemies of them. Seeing Kenon and Primula go silent, Ken realizes that Thogalum is the bastard who was harassing Primula's business. He had done some deep digging about him and found that he has strong connections with people in power, and he sometimes handles the dirty business of the Viscount. However, since completing the canal on time is their first priority, Kenon still decides to do business with Ken. He provides the required number of axes and then purchases a huge amount of kerosene to fuel his excavator to dig the canal. The beastfolk laborers keep cutting the trees in the meantime, and they take out some time from the work to hunt tributes for Vel because they all worship bobcats. When Ken returns home later, he learns that Kenon's carriage will still take some time to get here, so he invites her to stay over at his house. He then prepares a delicious dinner with Anne's help, and Kenon is really blown over by the taste. Ken then notices his cat friends watching them from afar and invites them to join him. They say that they want to eat with him, but have to refuse because that would be unfair to the rest of the workers. They tell Ken that there is only one restaurant nearby, but the food there is too expensive, so most of the workers eat unappetizing food. Primula gets an idea to help the workers while boosting her business, and with Ken's permission, she sets up her food stall to cater to the workers for a good price. Later that night, Ken buys new bathtubs so that Kenon can have a bath, and this thirsty bitch orders him to take a bath with her. She literally throws herself at him, but Ken dodges all her advances, telling her that he is a family guy, and he doesn't want to get involved any deeper with nobles. The next morning, when Ken wakes up, he finds Kenon helping Primula with her food stall, and seeing her act like normal people makes him see her in a different light. However, he assures his girls that he is not going to let the Viscountess slide into his pants, but Kenon tells him that she has an entire month to try. Suddenly, the owner of the restaurant nearby comes there and starts yelling like a total Karen at Primula for stealing her business. However, when she hears that Primula is the daughter of the famous merchant Mallow, she backs down. Primula tells her that if she wants people to eat at her restaurant, she should charge a fair price, and the woman has no choice but to do the same. Ken keeps working on the canal after that, and soon, Kenon's servants arrive there, but they don't get much to do. Soon, Ken realizes that they are running out of water, and he doesn't like the idea of buying it online. So he asks the workers how do they keep themselves clean, and they tell him about a spring up in the hills that is easy for them to reach but hard for humans to access. Ken tells them to fetch water for him in exchange of alcohol, and the beastmen immediately take up the side gig. They get Ken all the water he needs during the day and hold a drinking party at night. Kenon gets wasted along with the beastmen, and she becomes even more aggressive as she hits on Ken. However, he uses the fact that she is hammered to make her sign a contract that she will follow his instructions from now on to stop her attempts at seducing him. With that distraction out of the way, Ken completes the construction of the canal in time, and the royal family arrives from the capital to celebrate the completion. Ken is also forced to attend the celebration, even though he didn't want to, and then Kenon calls him forward to display his unique magic in front of everyone. He decides to play along, summoning his excavator and juggling a log with it to impress everyone. After that, the nobles start mingling with each other, and one old man who is particularly jealous of Kenon's territory doesn't even hide that he was hoping they would fail and abandon their land. He leaves furious when Kenon laughs at his statement, but when he enters his carriage, Primula spots the ex-noble who paid the bandit Shaga to kidnap her. Ken realizes that the old noble will probably be an enemy, but there is nothing to do about that right now. Later, he meets with Kenon's husband, the Viscount, who confesses that until now, he left the governance of his territory in the hands of other people. However, after barely making the deadline thanks to Ken, he has decided to do better and take full charge of his duties. But that is not the main thing he wants to talk about. Instead of the issues with the territory, the Viscount is more curious about the printed books Ken was selling, because he is something of an artist himself. He pleads with Ken to teach him how he printed these books, and Ken obliges, making the fatty happy that he can finally publish the books he has written. After that, the Viscount talks with Primula, asking her to take the charge of his land's finances from now on, because without her, the corruption of the merchants would never come to light. Primula replies that it is too much for her and says that she will ask for help from her father. While the Viscount is thankful that she is calling the famous Mallow Trading Company for help, he is also worried that this might upset Thogalum enough to do nasty things. Ken tells him to use force to get rid of that bastard, but the Viscount reveals that they don't have enough money to maintain an army, which is why they can't do anything against Thogalum. Kenon suddenly springs up, saying that Ken can handle that problem, and he realizes that he won't be able to refuse her in the end, so he agrees to do so if he ever receives the orders. Soon after that, Ken and his girls return home, and while they are taking a bath together, Mina remarks that since Anne has great magic powers, she must have got it from her mommy. Ken agrees with her and asks Anne if she knows anything about her biological mother, but she tells him that she has no idea. Apparently, she was raised by a woman on the streets after her real mother passed away, and now she doesn't want to bother finding her biological family because she is satisfied living with Ken. The next day, Ken and Anne go to the old wizard lady who registers the high protection spell book for them. As Anne goes to read the spell book, Ken asks the old lady if she has ever heard about a talented young mage who died on the streets roughly 10 years ago. The old woman knows that Ken is looking for Anne's mother, and though she doesn't know anything about a mage dying on the streets, she remembers a talented black-haired mage named Armeria who disappeared around 10 years ago. Coincidentally, Armeria was the previous owner of the High Protection Spellbook before Anne according to the records, and the old woman thinks it can't be just a coincidence. However, she tells Ken that he shouldn't bother looking for Anne's family because she is obviously in love with him. Ken is deeply shocked on hearing this, and he clearly tells the old hag that he is not a PDF file and Anne is like his daughter. Soon after that, Ken returns home with Anne and Mayu, but Anne decides to practice the High Protection spell midway. She manages to create a barrier for just 1 second before it shatters, and she falls to the ground. She looks upset because she failed, and as Ken tries to cheer her up, she tells him that her stomach is hurting. Ken panics on hearing that and begins looking for a stomach ache medicine online, but Mayu smells something strange. She tells Ken that Anne just had her first period, and he realizes what is going on. He hurries her back home, and thankfully, Primula also returns from work just in time. She gives Anne the talk about periods and the changes in her body, and she comes running outside, cheerfully telling Ken that she can have babies now. Ken tells her that it is good for her, but then Anne suddenly tells him that she wants his babies. Ken spits his coffee on hearing that, and then tells Anne that she is at least 5 years too young to do anything with him, but this upsets Primula. She pulls Ken's ears, asking him if he is being serious, but he tells her that he is just distracting Anne for the time being, because when she grows up, she is going to find another guy and marry him. A few days later, as Ken is working on the cliff behind his house, he spots a carriage running on water. He is surprised by this, and even more surprised when Mallow comes out of it. Mallow greets the two of them and congratulates Primula on her successful business, before telling Ken that they need to discuss how to deal with Thogalum. Ken stops the overeager merchant and tells him that before discussing business rivals, they need to discuss something more important first. He sets up a picnic setup under a beach umbrella, and both Primula and Mallow forget about everything else as they begin speculating the business potential of the umbrella. After that, Ken formally asks Mallow to let him marry his daughter, and the old man just laughs it off, saying that he can't do anything now because Primula has already barged into his house. They have a nice little family moment, and later, Ken throws a party in honor of his father-in-law. Soon, Mallow starts working to increase his influence in the market in this city, and in the meantime, some old friends come to see Ken. Crouton has come to pay him a visit, and he has brought Paul with him. Paul is delighted on see Primula, But when he learns that she married Ken, he is devastated. He thought that she was just shy when she vanished after he proposed to her, but now he realizes that he had no chance. He gives up and accepts that Primula chose the better guy to spend her life with. With another strong ally by his side, Ken decides to deal with Thogalum and goes to the market where Kenon and her husband are also present to see him take on the evil merchant. Ken goes to Thogalum's trading company's stalls and asks if they buy stuff, and an eager guy affirms. Ken says he has something to sell and immediately pulls out the corpse of the giant spider monster out of his item box. That creates chaos and panic in the market, and the merchant asks Ken if he is trying to pick a fight with them. Ken tells him that he is exactly correct, and Thogalum's goon come there armed for battle before he shows up himself. His lackeys identify Ken and tell Thogalum that he is the mage who has been messing up with their business. Ken tells the bastard that he will pay him back for harassing his wife, and Thogalum orders his goons to attack him because he is alone. However, Ken has not come there without backup, and Paul, Crouton and others step up to fight alongside him. Thogalum is still confident about his victory because he has more goons, but when Val jumps in front of Ken, all the catfolk are taken aback. When they learn that the sacred bobcat is a member of Ken's family, they turn tail and run away because they can't fight against it. Thogalum retreats into his stronghold immediately, and as Ken and his group enter there, they find a gang of dog mercenaries who have no issues fighting a bobcat. Val gets suspiciously agitated on seeing their leader, and Ken realizes that he is the bastard who hurt her in the past. The dog mercenaries immediately attack them, and Paul steps forward to fight against their leader. Mayu and Mina deal with the rest of the dog mercenaries, flaunting their flawless archery technique, while Crouton's friend also pushes the dogs back. The head dog keeps fighting against Paul on equal footing, and then Ken decides to join the fight as well. He summons his mini excavator and begins destroying Thogalum's estate, and tossing stones at his lackeys to knock them out. Thogalum finds that he is alone now, and he tries running away, but Ken gives chase. Once he follows Thogalum outside, Ken puts the mini excavator back in his item box and summons the big one to destroy his shop. As Ken destroys his building, the jerk begins to panic, but then Mallow asks Ken to stop, saying that there is no need to destroy the building because they can use it as their headquarters in this city. Thogalum curses Mallow and Ken, but tells them that they will be punished by the law for trying to kill him. However, Ken tells him that it is going to be the other way around. He says that the moment Thogalum commanded his goons to draw their weapons, he became accused of plotting against the Viscount's life. The bastard doesn't understand what is going on, and then the Viscount steps forward, acting like Thogalum was trying to kill him to provide Ken a valid reason for his crash out. The Viscount then tells Thogalum that if he leaves behind his property and goes away from the city for good, he is going to forgive him for his crimes. Thogalum has no choice but to take this offer to save his life, and before going, he tells Mallow that he has found a good partner in Ken. However, he asks him to think carefully about why his daughter was kidnapped. Just as he says this, a messenger comes from the royal capital, saying that the king has summoned the mage known as Ken immediately. The Viscount confirms that the letter is real, and Thogalum laughs as he tells Ken that the nail that sticks out gets hammered. He leaves with that, but Ken is lost in deep thoughts about his words. He begins to suspect that the real reason Primula was kidnapped because some powerful people were jealous about the increase in Mallow Company's value after he allied with them. The thought that he was the reason Primula was in danger enrages Ken, and he decides to ensure her safety from now on. That night, he tells Primula and Mallow that he won't be providing them any new item for the time being so that they don't get some unwanted attention. Primula refuses to accept that he is the reason she was in danger. She says that they need to take risks to earn profit, and getting kidnapped is included in it. She tells Ken that she doesn't care about the consequences because she has decided to spend her life with him. She says that the royal family was bound to call him sooner or later, and now she wants to go along with him to support him. The next day, Crouton takes his wife and daughter to his new home in Paul's territory. Anne bids an emotional farewell to her best friend Mary, and after that, Ken decides to make his move as well. He packs all his stuff and then asks Kenon and the Viscount what will happen if he runs away instead of going to the capital. Both of them panic on hearing this because that would be considered an act of rebellion, and they would be considered guilty for letting Ken escape. Seeing that he has no choice, Ken decides to go to the royal capital, and his girls are not going to leave him no matter what he tells them. Soon, Ken and his girls reach the royal capital in their car, and they are surprised to see golems doing repair work in the castle walls. Once they cross the walls, they enter the capital city, but they have no maps because the city's layout is top secret, and Ken gets as lost as Zorro while trying to find a way. He somehow reaches the palace and shows the guards the invitation letter from the king. The guards tell him to wait outside, and soon, the princess of the country comes out to see the guest. Ken and his girls immediately kneel before Princess Lilith, who asks him how the hell did he get to the capital from a faraway city in just 2 weeks. Ken tells her about his summoned beast that he rides, which is his car, and Lilith is really curious about it. Despite her attendants warning her of the danger, she gets in the car with Ken, who takes her for a ride. Lilith is impressed by the car, but Ken tries to lecture her about not getting in vehicles with strangers, asking what would she do if he kidnapped her. However, the princess thrives on chaos and tells him that being kidnapped will be a new and exciting adventure for her. Ken realizes that saying anything to her is pointless, and he simply leads her back to the palace gate. The servants start nagging Lilith about her reckless actions, and she tells them to quit the job if they can't handle her. After that, she inspects Ken's companions and decides that he is a person she can trust. She decides to reward him just because she likes him, and Ken wants nothing more than a corner of the royal garden where he can set up camp to stay with his family. He explains that most inns won't accept beast folk, but he wants them to stay with him, and Lilith just laughs at his simple request. She permits Ken to set up camp in the gardens till he gets to meet the king, but also makes it clear that it may take months for him to get an audience. Ken is already exhausted thinking about the waiting period, but he follows Lilith to a corner of the royal garden where he summons his house. Everyone is shocked to see him pull out a house out of nowhere, and Lilith doesn't wait for anyone as she heads inside to check it. Her worried servants rush after her, but she is faster than everyone and explores the house quickly. She then declares that she is going to stay here with Ken, and despite her servants telling her that it is unacceptable, she does whatever she wants. After that, Ken sets up other buildings near his house, and then he summons his mini excavator to dig out toilet pits. Lilith is really curious to see the iron beasts she has only heard of and climbs on Ken's lap, causing chaos among her servants. Ken carries her out in his arms, but that pisses off one of Lilith's guards, who tells him to put his filthy hands away from the princess. As soon as Ken puts the princess on the ground, the guard attacks him, but Ken reacts quickly and purchases a riot shield to protect himself. He then summons his crossbow to scare the guard into backing away, but Anne is not satisfied with that. She begins charging a fireball to grill the guard, and Ken fails to stop her from shooting the attack. Luckily, a mage protects the guard using a magic barrier, and before things can get any worse, Lilith steps in and tells everyone to calm down. She then turns to Anne, saying that it is impressive that she is a skilled mage at her age. Lilith asks her about the other spells she can use, and when Anne reveals that she can use Explosion spell, the princess is surprised. She tells the guards that they are lucky that Anne didn't use Explosion from the get-go, or they would be getting a promotion for sacrificing their lives. After that, Ken tells Lilith that he needs to prepare dinner, and she is curious to see what he eats, so she invites herself over. Ken wins her heart by feeding her curry, and Lilith is curious about the spices he used in it. Ken just passes her the curry powder, claiming that it is a famous product from his hometown, but he doesn't know the exact spices used in it. Lilith is satisfied with that, and she immediately moves on to the cutlery Ken is using for her. She asks him to sell it to her, and Primula tells Ken to hike up the prices by a lot, because the princess won't mind paying it. Following her advice, Ken sells 10 sets of plates and spoons to the princess, who tells her maid to take them and the spice mix to the head chef. Once the maid is gone, Lilith begins asking Ken if he has any forbidden goods in his item box. But then Anne suddenly gets jealous of the princess getting too close to Ken. She pulls him apart, and though Ken assures Lilith that he is like Anne's dad, she is intent to make him her daddy. She proudly tells the princess that once she turns of age, she is going to have Ken's children, and this statement makes Lilith insecure and sad because she knows she will have to marry someone she doesn't even like for political reasons. Soon, night arrives, and Lilith takes a bath before going to sleep with Anne and Primula. Ken and the cat girls sleep outside, but then suddenly, the cats sense something strange from the direction of the palace. The next day onwards, Ken's life is completely directed by Lilith's whims. She sends him on missions to exterminate rats in the palace basement, and even holds an auction for the giant monster spider in his item box. A few days later, she decides to treat him to the curry that the palace head chef made, and though it looks completely different, Ken finds that it tastes quite similar. He praises the head chef, but Lilith asks him if he has something that the chef can't copy. Ken doesn't like unnecessary competition, but he pulls out a box of luxury chocolates for the princess, and the head chef admits defeat after tasting just one piece. The next day, Lilith returns to Ken's house for more chocolates, saying that the queen wants to eat them too. Ken immediately gives her a box, and then Lilith explains that the queen is not her biological mother, but they are on good terms. She also warns him that the queen is quite moody, and he should try not to get on her bad side when he meets her. A few days after that, the cat girls once again sense the strange feeling they got earlier, and even Lilith's maids begin to gossip amongst themselves. Lilith tells Ken that most people believe that ghosts haunt the royal palace, and they might be feeling their presence. Anne and others are terrified just by hearing this, but then Lilith's maids advise her to ask Ken to exorcise the ghosts. Ken quickly takes up the offer, even though he doesn't know what he can do about ghosts, but he gets permission from Lilith to let the cats enter the palace with him. After that, he begins preparing for the ghost-busting mission and purchases holy water online and mixes it with alcohol to spray around. He is not even sure if it will work, but as he sprays the places where the cat girls and the maids feel the strange presence from, they tell him that his exorcism is working, and they are feeling at ease. Ken thinks that it is just the placebo effect, but he continues spraying the holy water spray throughout the palace and finally reaches the last destination, which is the queen's bedroom. Lilith explains that the queen is having trouble sleeping lately, and even when Ken sprays the entire room, the bobcat Val feels no difference. However, her attention is stuck on a flower vase in the room, and Ken realizes that it must be the cause of the problem. He asks Lilith to tell the queen to dispose of the vase, and she tells him that she will handle it. Lilith decides to reward Ken for exorcising the ghosts by letting him read rare books on magic in the royal library, and tells him that he cannot take anything out of the room. She leaves him and Anne alone in the room with that, and they find different interesting books. Anne says that they can't read all of them, but Ken tells her that they are just going to copy them instead of reading. Anne says that it is illegal, but when Ken reminds her about how much Lilith has annoyed her, she agrees to copy the books with a portable scanner. Soon after that, the day of the audience with the king finally arrives, and Ken heads to the throne room with his entire family by his side.